Welcome to the fascinating world of biology. In this video, we will explore the fascinating field of taxonomy, which is the study of how living organisms are classified and named. Taxonomy is a crucial aspect of biology, as it helps us understand the diversity of life on Earth and how different species are related to each other. Taxonomy is based on a hierarchical system of classification, which means that living organisms are grouped into increasingly specific categories based on their characteristics. The most basic level of classification is the species, which is a group of organisms that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. Above the species level, organisms are grouped into genera, families, orders, classes, phyla, and kingdoms. Each of these categories represents a larger and more inclusive group of organisms with shared characteristics and evolutionary history. The history of taxonomy dates back to the ancient Greeks, who were the first to classify living organisms based on their physical characteristics. However, it was not until the 18th century that the Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus developed the modern system of taxonomy that we use today. Linnaeus' system is based on a set of rules and principles that ensure that each organism is given a unique scientific name that reflects its evolutionary relationships. The scientific name of an organism consists of two parts, the genus name and the species name. For example, humans are classified as Homo sapiens, where Homo is the genus name and sapiens is the species name. In the next segment, we will explore the different categories of taxonomy in more detail and learn how they are used to classify living organisms. As we mentioned in the previous segment, taxonomy is based on a hierarchical system of classification. Let's take a closer look at the different categories of taxonomy and how they are used to classify living organisms. The first and most basic level of classification is the species. A species is a group of organisms that can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. For example, all humans belong to the same species, Homo sapiens. Above the species level, organisms are grouped into genera. A genus is a group of closely related species that share common characteristics. For example, the genus Panther includes all the big cats, such as lions, tigers, and leopards. Above the genus level, organisms are grouped into families. A family is a group of related genera that share common characteristics. For example, the family Felidae includes all the cats, both big and small. Above the family level, organisms are grouped into orders. An order is a group of related families that share common characteristics. For example, the order Carnivora includes all the meat-eating mammals, such as cats, dogs, and bears. Above the order level, organisms are grouped into classes. A class is a group of related orders that share common characteristics. For example, the class Mammalia includes all the mammals, which are characterized by their ability to nurse their young with milk. Above the class level, organisms are grouped into phyla. A phylum is a group of related classes that share common characteristics. For example, the phylum Chordate includes all the animals that have a spinal cord, such as mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Finally, above the phylum level, organisms are grouped into kingdoms. A kingdom is a group of related phyla that share common characteristics. There are 5 kingdoms of living organisms: Myrmebacteria, protista single-celled organisms, fungi, mushrooms, and other fungi, plantae, plants, and animalia, animals. In the next segment, we will explore the different characteristics that are used to classify living organisms into these categories. In the previous segment, we explored the different categories of taxonomy. In this segment, we will explore the different characteristics that are used to classify living organisms into these categories. Taxonomists use a variety of characteristics to classify living organisms, including physical characteristics, genetic characteristics, and evolutionary history. Physical characteristics are the most commonly used characteristics in taxonomy. These include things like an organism's shape, size, color, and behavior. For example, all members of the cat family Felidae have retractable claws, which is a physical characteristic that distinguishes them from other carnivorous mammals. Genetic characteristics are also important in taxonomy. DNA sequencing has revolutionized the field of taxonomy, allowing scientists to compare the genetic makeup of different organisms and determine their evolutionary relationships. For example, DNA sequencing has shown that humans are more closely related to chimpanzees than to any other living species. Evolutionary history is another important characteristic used in taxonomy. Organisms that share a common ancestor are classified together, even if they have different physical or genetic characteristics. For example, birds and crocodiles are classified together in the same class Reptilia because they share a common ancestor, even though they have very different physical characteristics. In addition to these characteristics, taxonomists also use a variety of other tools and techniques to classify living organisms, including anatomy, embryology, and biogeography. Anatomy is the study of the structure of living organisms. By comparing the anatomy of different organisms, taxonomists can determine their evolutionary relationships. For example, the presence of wings is a characteristic that distinguishes birds from other animals. Embryology is the study of the development of living organisms from fertilization to birth. By comparing the embryonic development of different organisms, taxonomists can determine their evolutionary relationships. For example, the embryonic development of fish is very different from the embryonic development of mammals. Biogeography is the study of the distribution of living organisms around the world. By studying the distribution of different organisms, taxonomists can determine their evolutionary history and relationships. For example, the presence of marsupials in Australia is a result of the continent's isolation from other landmasses. In the next segment, we will explore the importance of taxonomy in understanding the diversity of life on Earth. Taxonomy is a crucial aspect of biology, as it helps us understand the diversity of life on Earth and how different species are related to each other. Here are some of the key reasons why taxonomy is important. 1. Understanding biodiversity. Taxonomy allows us to identify and classify the millions of species that exist on Earth. By understanding the diversity of life, we can better appreciate the complexity and beauty of the natural world. 2. Conservation. Taxonomy is essential for conservation efforts, as it allows us to identify and protect endangered species. By understanding the evolutionary relationships between different species, we can also develop strategies for preserving entire ecosystems. 3. Agriculture. Taxonomy is important in agriculture, as it allows us to identify and classify crop plants and their wild relatives. This information is essential for developing new crop varieties and improving agricultural productivity. 4. Medicine. Taxonomy is also important in medicine, as it allows us to identify and classify disease-causing organisms. This information is essential for developing new treatments and vaccines. 5. Evolutionary studies. Taxonomy is essential for understanding the evolutionary history of life on Earth. By studying the relationships between different species, we can develop a better understanding of how life has evolved over time. In addition to these practical applications, taxonomy is also important for its own sake. Understanding the diversity of life and how different species are related to each other is a fundamental aspect of biology. In conclusion, taxonomy is a crucial aspect of biology that allows us to understand the diversity of life on Earth and how different species are related to each other. By studying the characteristics of living organisms and their evolutionary history, taxonomists are able to classify and name the millions of species that exist on our planet.